I received questions from two people regarding the prosthodontics. I had earlier asked you that if possible to send me your doubts on chat, on Messenger, so that I can have an idea of how many questions are still pending, need to be answered. I only received doubts from two people, but I'm pretty sure that most everybody will have similar like the questions that are a little bit different or a little bit difficult. There will be common doubts. And another thing is that just earlier I posted this on the group. So it says like starting now we'll have to juggle more than one topic. So previously, for those of you who started in July, for those of you who received the material to study early, it was like you read, you finish. After you finish the whole topic, we start to discuss the topic. On Sunday, we meet, we discuss the topic, we answer some of the questions. Then Monday, Tuesday, you have to review the same topic that we had, and before you start your new topic. So reading pretty much the whole thing, you have time to read pretty much the whole thing because there was extra time before the course started. And then adding 1 or 2 days after the session for just reinforce or make sure that the subject that we had already covered and had already discussed, you make sure that it's reinforced. So from now on, you will have 2 things to do during those first 2-3 days of the week. During the first 2-3 days of the week, you'll have to review the same topic that we're studying. For example, Monday, Tuesday of next week, you'll be studying surgery. But at the same time, you'll have prosthodontics because we have a class on Wednesday for the questions, and it will still be the prosthodontics. On Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you read the rest of the surgery. On Sunday, we discuss surgery, and then you have 2 days or 2 or 3 days for just make sure that you have like review the surgery, make sure that you've studied it, read it 1 or 2 times and understand the concepts and answer the questions. If you have any doubts, ask them, etc. During those 2-3 days, I'll ask you to read patient management, and then the week after I'll ask you to read orthodontics, for example. So you will always have an additional task during that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that previously you only had to have, okay, I'm just going to go over whatever we discussed on Sunday. So that might mean that for some people who are working, things are not going to be that easy to juggle anymore, and maybe more time need to be invested in this process. The thing is that NDB does not allow you to register yet, and you still have doubts that whether or not I'll get a seat, and very skeptical of previous bad experience of NDB not letting people give exam. But if not done right, if you don't start early, if you don't study as if you already have a spot in the exam, then before the exam you'll be stressed, you'll have so much to recover, the like review and read again and review. It's not that's not gonna work. So anyways, hope everybody can make the extra time and will be able to like follow the plan or be able to read and review and read the new topic and review the old ones. So as I told you guys, there were two people who sent me their doubts, and one of them I put arrow on the question, so we'll be pointing to the question, and the other person I put a rectangle. Okay.
Recording in progress.
So if you guys, anybody who's listening has any doubts, please don't hesitate to post them on chat. Okay, the first two questions are easy. The fourth one, I guess. So the fourth question, in complete denture, the external oblique ridge is used as a guide for. So border molding the lower denture, you ask the patient to move their tongue right and left and front. You manually mold the cheek to be able to get that distal buccal border. You ask them to like put their chin up. All of this is like to move the muscles, to get the most extreme movement of the muscle, so that floor of the mouth, masseter, mentalis. Okay, Alexander, it's gonna be hard for me to post all of it on chat like that, but I'm gonna try my best. And let's see. So mouse mode. No. Okay. So let's see. So for that part of the denture, the masseter muscle, which is attaching to the ramus of the mandible, is the most significant and the strongest muscle that on the buccal side can move the denture. Later on, you'll get a question about, so what else is there in that distal buccal area? In the distal buccal area is the external oblique ridge. Okay, I know about that one. Temporalis, some fibers from temporalis, some fibers from buccinator, as well as the pterygomandibular raphe. And those structures, the buccinator, superior constrictor, the pterygomandibular raphe, they make up the retromolar pad. So the retromolar pad, it's not just a connective tissue, it has ligaments and it has muscle attachments. So yes, the attachment at the base is not movable, but once you go up that retromolar pad, it actually starts to be movable. So we are not supposed to cover more than 2/3 of the retromolar pad. So question is on question number 5, and if anyone has like the courage and I want to explain this, like as you guys can see, we had in chat, we had someone ask about question number 5. If you want to say, oh, I know why this is so, please don't hesitate. When do we remount? So we mount in the beginning, just once we get for the complete denture, we get the centric relation record. And remember that we only get the centric relation record after we finalize the vertical dimension of occlusion. The vertical dimension of occlusion should be 2 to 4 millimeters less than the vertical dimension of rest. And once we have that right, and once we have the planes, say the posterior plane parallel to the elytragus and the anterior plane parallel to the interpupillary, once we have that, we can mount the dentures and mount the wax rims and start to put the teeth in place. If everything is okay with the try-in, we put the denture through the flasking and we fabricate the acrylic dentures. During that heat cycle, during the cooking of the acrylic, there is warpage, and once the denture is recovered, it has to be, so put a little bit of Vaseline, pour the fitting surface, and then make a cast out of it. Now mount that denture up on the articulator again, and try your best to eliminate most of the effects of the warpage. So that's the first remount, and it's a lab remount. Then next remount would be that during when the patient is there in the chair. So when the patient is there in the chair, we can put the denture in place and start to take like the centric and eccentric using articulating paper. But this is very time consuming. Okay, I think maybe so. If the denture is time consuming, that's time consuming. So it's not the lab that will do it. It is the dentists themselves. The lab will bring the denture on the articulator, mounted with the casts in place. So if we undo the lower, just break the ring on the lower, and then take another centric relation record with the patient in the chair, and then use that new record to mount the denture on the articulator to mount the lower, because the phase bow did not change, so that one you don't need to change for the maxillary denture. The only thing that changes how the teeth occlude together. So break that plaster on the lower cast and remount it. And then with the patient in the chair, or even with the patient in the waiting room, you can adjust and make sure that the occlusion is fully balanced occlusion. And then when the patient put the patient back in the chair, put the denture in place, it will not have any interference. This is so much easier than having the patient who's still not used to the denture, who's still not used to, okay, I need you to bite to the right, to the left. I don't know what they're really very anxious at this time to do the adjustment intraorally. So for those of you who have just messaged, so a whole list of questions, I am not so sure I'll be able to follow the numbers. So if you have a question, like I'll be on the page. If it's not highlighted by those guys who sent me earlier the list, you can just unmute your mic for a second and ask me about the question, and then we can, if not, I will just keep following whatever I have there in my own questions, the handout I have. Okay, so I don't think anybody asked about 6. But 6 is about this word. So if it wasn't this word, what would be the answer? All of the above. Do you guys have any doubts or questions about why any of the, like, how come relining is so important for all of this? Okay, I guess not. So we move on. Question. Okay, one question is asking why this would be the primary. If I have good tissue adaptation, if I have the support from my free end saddle, which is supposed to be carrying the main load of vertical forces, I have the occlusion and I have the chewing capacity, which is the occlusion, and I have a framework which does not kind of rock. There's no rocking. So how, like, what do you add when doing, what do we add? We add acrylic on the fitting surface. Why do we add this? In order to improve tissue adaptation. Why do we improve tissue adaptation? Maybe it's okay to have a space. You know, if we have a space, we'll have some candidal infection, we'll have ridge resorption because of the rocking. And if we have the rocking, we have a framework that just keeps rocking. And if that's the case, we cannot eat and the occlusion is off. Okay. So someone asked for question 7. So question 7. The tooth preparation for a porcelain veneer must create. Okay, so we use diamond burr to create the veneer preparation, which, by the way, will be in the operative handout. So which means we didn't really talk about veneers yet, but might as well. Veneer. So art and science will say that. So this is a bad picture, but hopefully we can. So we have to provide space for bonding and veneering the materials for maximal aesthetic without over contouring. So we have to make space, okay. We have to remove the outer fluoride-rich layer of the enamel that may be resistant to acid etching, okay. So we have to remove the enamel, which is very fluoride-rich. We have to create rough surface for improved bonding. And then we have to establish a definite finish line. It cannot be a feather edge. It cannot be just like no finish line. We have to establish a finish line, and establishing an inter-enamel preparation with a definitive finish line is particularly important when placing indirectly fabricated veneers, which means porcelain veneers indirectly fabricated, because then accurate positioning and seating can happen. Otherwise, we don't really know where the end of the preparation is, and the veneer might seat above it, below it, beside it. It might shift the position. So having a definite finish line is extremely important for accurate positioning, for seating of indirectly made veneers. Okay. So then, what about veneers? They are not recommended. Lumineers, they're not recommended. They're, I don't want to say contraindicated, but not favored. Okay, so the reason is that even if it's a very slight thickness of 0.2, for example, or 0.1, it's still a thickness. There will still be a a detectable cavo surface margin, right? So a detectable cavo surface margin is going to cause the bacteria will be able to inhabit that place, and gingival inflammation is likely unless the person is like really meticulous with their oral hygiene. So anyways, for space, the only exception where you really don't have to worry about over contouring is when you actually need to over contour because the tooth is too far lingual or too small, and our aim is to make it bigger. So if we go back to that question, Oh, wrong handout. If you go back to that question, rough surface is good, we need it. Space is good, we need it. But there are some times where we don't need the space because we actually need to add more onto the tooth, make the tooth look more prominent. And definitive finish line for a porcelain veneer has to be created. Okay. For mandibular denture, mylohyoid, the line drawn through the occlusal rests is the axis of rotation function of the compensating curve. Okay, question 10 is pretty straightforward and is easy to answer, I think. But what will happen if we don't have sufficient compensating curve? So that the aim or the reason behind the compensating curve is that, please excuse me, I cannot turn my hands up and down, but imagine that they are, can I do this? No. Okay. So we want the mandibular denture to slide against the maxillary denture without leaving any space. Okay, so if it's flat against flat, there will be space. The whole reason about the sphere is that you can move a sphere like this on another sphere without having any space. And without space means like this will not rock and the top one will not rock. The lower is the one that usually has like a lot of problems and you don't want it, the retention is easy to be lost, so you don't want it to dislodge. So the sphere, the whole idea about curve of Spee and curve of Munson is that we don't want any space. We want them to be in touch all the time. This is the fully balanced occlusion. And if there is a discrepancy or we didn't do any compensating curves at all, the teeth will come out of contact. There will be space between the teeth, and if there is space and on one side there's touch and on the other side there is space, unseat. Okay, so question number 10 is regarding that. Okay, good, I caught one of the questions that you guys asked about. Did that answer the question regarding those who asked about question number 10? If you still have doubts, please let me know. Okay. So it doesn't really need to be protruded. The function of the compensating curve in complete denture is provide balanced occlusion in every motion. So yeah. Sure. No. We actually need that curve of Spee. But for the patient who has deep bite, we actually need to level it up. Okay. So no. And if we level it up, we actually free the teeth. They're not biting too much on the anterior and grinding them. They're not biting too much on the posterior. If we level the curve of Spee, the dentate patient has less wear and tear because they no longer have the deep bite. But that's okay because their teeth are held in place by PDL and they don't need to worry about the denture thing being rocked out of place. Okay. So extreme resorption of an edentulous mandible can bring the alveolar ridge to the level of the attachment of those muscles. What to do? I mean, what would be like this is anatomy question, but now another question, like I know you know this, so maybe they always like to ask you, okay, so what next? I know you know this because the answer is there in the release question. We already answered them, so they will ask you something. What will you do? Yes, it's a bit tricky. There's the question about like this is being tricky. It's tricky because um so if you look at like maybe in styloglossus, this is and geniohyoid, this is easy to remove. But then if you're not so like like if you get confused with like the second and the third option, it gets confusing reading three things at the same time. So anyways, the mylohyoid, the buccinator, and the genioglossus. Definitely genioglossus and mylohyoid is very important. Buccinator is not so important. Um, because the only fiber of the buccinator that can lift the denture is the one in the retromolar pad. Whereas the ones in the cheek, they cannot lift the denture. So if the patient has high floor of the mouth, high myelohyoid, the two options available are to put implants and support the retention of the denture with implants, and that can be an overdenture. So implant, there's two words like implant supported and implant overdenture. So the implant overdenture is just a denture with acrylic and everything, but just has maybe like buttons or a bar that retains inside gets in a mechanical undercut in the denture itself. So that's the option that is easier. Whereas the other option would be to bring the floor of the mouth down to reattach the muscles, the genioglossus and the myelohyoid at a lower, if there is, at a basal level of the mandible. Okay. 12 is simple, 13 is not that hard. I don't think there is extra, like, behind something I need to explain other than what is straightforward there. For question 15, and now we get like those like arrows and rectangles, those two people who send me ahead of time. A patient with complete denture complains of clicking. The most common cause is, so the most common cause is something that will have to do with the teeth being too close together. There is maybe something is like off with the occlusion. We didn't remount using the which did in some weird reason, I got completely disconnected. Okay, we are back. Okay, so what was I saying? So with the patient, the clicking, the reduced vertical dimension and improperly balanced occlusion. Let's take it piece by piece. Reduced vertical dimension. What will be the most likely side effect of having reduced vertical dimension? Poor aesthetics, drooling, and angular cheilitis. Okay, because folds. What about improperly balanced occlusion? If patient has improperly balanced occlusion, the teeth will hit together and probably they will have a dislodgement of the denture. Yes, there will be a click, but the problem, the main complaint is like, it's not like they're talking and talking and talking and the denture is making those noises all the time. No, the denture falls and then they have to stop. They have to put it back again. So their complaint will be, my denture keeps falling out. Use of a too large posterior tooth and too little horizontal overlap. I don't know what is a too large posterior tooth, maybe like too wide or something. If the tooth is too wide, maybe they get tongue biting or cheek biting. Little horizontal overlap means edge to edge on the cheek side, so they don't have the buccal cusp of upper overlap the buccal cusp of lower. This will cause cheek biting. And then improper relation of teeth to the ridge and excessive anterior vertical overlap, this will lead to dislodgement of the denture. If there is improper relation of the teeth to the ridge, the teeth are not on the ridge, there will be imbalance. Okay, so vertical dimension is too much. Okay, so how come excessive vertical dimension? Because the occlusion is okay, but the teeth are bigger, so there is no closest speaking space. There is no space between the teeth and the patient every time that they're trying to speak with this little very small gap between their teeth. There is no very small gap between their teeth, so they keep doing this. But the denture is still in place. Okay. And poor retention. If the denture is loose, it depends. Like if it's loose but not super loose, if it's still in place and they're talking and it keeps coming off and tapping against the other denture, then it will make that noise. So if I were to pick, it's actually this one as the most important reason for the clicking noises. I hope that makes sense, and I hope number 15 is now good. For the cast gold restoration, okay, cast gold was very nice option back in the days when there was no zirconia. We still do gold crowns sometimes when there is maybe like a short tooth, a short 7, and there is no room for the zirconia. Or patient is a Bruxer grinder and we want to make sure that they don't break their other teeth. The opposing doesn't have a crown. So if you put a gold crown on the bottom, it's cushioning for the bite rather than the zirconia maybe breaking the upper. So anyways, a gingival bevel, but we never ever do a bevel. Instead of a shoulder, but we never ever do a shoulder. Okay, when do we do a shoulder for a gold restoration? We never, ever, not in time, not in previous, not in nowadays, and not in olden days. Okay, but the bevel is not used. Okay, what is a bevel? When if you have you don't have a finish line. The lab will just adapt the gold as much as possible. So you're first of all, like, you guys see like how like this question is not, it doesn't work anymore nowadays. we don't do bevel. So when someone is asking, so how come it can increase the retention? Says here bevel old Schellenberg. This is really like 1900s. Okay, so this is not even like, it's like maybe 30 years ago or something. But I do happen to have the book, so I took a picture of it, and it's not gonna help at all because anyways, like we don't use bevel, we don't use anyways. In contrast to the shoulder is a distinct finish line and provides an adequate bulk of material, which is necessary for PFM, which is maybe okay for the weaker ceramics. It's certainly not necessary for zirconia, and both zirconia as well as the other ceramics will do fine with a slightly deeper chamfer than the usual 0.5 millimeter chamfer of gold. So anyways, however, does not have a recommended acute edge to the metal and can leave a fragile, unprotected edge of tooth structure to protect the enamel. Do you really worry about protecting the fragile enamel at this point? Like, do we really worry about breaking the enamel at the finish line? No. Unprotected edge of tooth structure, they mean protect the enamel. The finish line is recommended for porcelain restorations only. Okay, so we'll only use shoulder for porcelain. The beveled shoulder is recommended for extremely short walls since it permits that critical portion of the axial wall just coronal to the finish line to be formed nearly parallel to the path, Anyways, so if you have a bevel feather, it's pretty much increasing the height of the preparation. So instead of having 2 millimeter preparation with the bevel is maybe 2.5. Okay, but then the lab doesn't really know exactly where this ends. And this is only for crowns. And this is only for crowns that we don't do anymore, and we don't do any bevel anymore. Okay, so that's not used. This finish line is not used. Okay, so that is completely obsolete. So close it. For a cast gold restoration, a chamfer is the bevel is the a chamfer finish line is recommended. Right? So which means no. But as you guys can see, protects the enamel, increases the retention, improves marginal adaptation, reduces the thickness of the gold so it can be easily burnished, is all coming from that old Schellenberg. Farnaz, for this question, I have tried to explain that we don't use bevel and we don't use shoulder for gold and we don't use bevel. So why does it, like, how come the answer is important? I don't understand. It's important to know that chamfer is recommended for cast gold restorations and that we do not make bevel. So now we don't have to pick why we do a bevel. Okay. Question 18. So question 18 says, in treatment planning for removal partial denture, a knife edge bony ridge will. So a knife edge bony ridge is very common in the mandible. Okay, so a knife edge bony ridge is not that uncommon. It's actually very common. So do we need the surgery all the time? Is it possible for the knife edge just to have a knife edge relief and not necessitate the surgery? Is it possible to relieve it? If it's possible to relieve it sometimes, and only extreme cases we would need to reduce that ridge, then don't do the surgery. Okay, so it doesn't make impression difficult. Soft tissue that move, like for example, if the patient have flabby ridge on maxilla, that makes impression taking difficult. You don't know if it's to the forward or to the backward. If you push against it, it will move. So bony things, they're not that hard to take impression of. Cause difficulty in tooth selection is no, it will cause problem in the stability of the denture. None of the above, because it needs the surgery most of the time. Most of the time we do relief. Most of the time we don't really need to do the surgery for the knife edge ridge. I hope that knife, maybe I find it. I don't think so though. I don't think I have a copy of that part. But if you wanted to open up page 123 of prosthetic treatment of the edentulous patient, and surgery would be HOP, page 109. So the lab remount. So the lab remount of processed dentures is done. Why do we do the lab remount? Because at the time of the water bath, we heat the water and then the acrylic, it changes dimension. We try our best to put a lot of acrylic dough and compress it so that it's so dense that there is no room to change, but still it will change. And as we cool down the water bath, it will warp. So lab makes a jig. Lab makes kind of a device to remount the denture again. Once they have recovered, once they have deflasked the denture, they can put it back on. They can pour it, have casts, and put it back on the articulator, and then try their best to equilibrate, to make sure that we have the balanced occlusion. This will not need to happen for digital dentures because they are not cured like that. The acrylic is not cured, it's printed. '22 is treatment planning. So if we have significant occlusal contact, when would be the best time to remove it? We'd have to do this first and figure out if the tooth needs, that opposing tooth needs to be extracted. Will we do orthodontics and intrude it? Will we do root canal treatment or not? All of those will be done. She was asking, what are the drawbacks of digital dentures? Digital dentures have, sometimes they don't have life like the other dentures do. When the teeth are printed, the fine details are lost. So they sometimes look fake, like the teeth are fake, whereas very good teeth, like the lab will ask, like, okay, do you want like premium teeth or I don't know what teeth? Anyways, like the more expensive teeth, they're a lot like natural. Like I'm pretty sure they have even layering. So they look very natural. Whereas a 3D printed of the same color tooth, like it's not so, but it has very good tissue adaptation. It doesn't warp. And the occlusion is right there, right? Like that's it. It doesn't change. The function of an indirect retainer is to prevent the movement away. So who prevents movement away from the tissues? The direct retainer and the indirect retainer. Who is close to the edentulous ridge? The closest to the edentulous ridge is the direct retainer, and the indirect retainer is the one furthest away from the closest. Okay. 24. The preconditioning of an all-ceramic restoration prior to bonding is achieved by. I'm pretty sure it was somewhere in like cementation or somewhere in the handout, in this handout. So hydrofluoric foam find hydrofluoric acid. So in order to cement, here it's to cement the lithium zirconia and lithium disilicate. Zirconia, you can apply a ceramic primer, but there's maybe, maybe it doesn't do that significant difference. It doesn't have that much of a significant difference. Apply the primer to the tooth and leave for 20 minutes, and then dispense the cement and cement. This is an example of bonding, clean prime bond. For the lithium disilicate is actually etchant. So the etchant will be hydrofluoric acid, rinse and dry. The hydrofluoric acid will actually etch the surface of the ceramic, which means chemically it will be roughened. And then the tooth will be bonded as usual, and the lithium disilicate will receive a priming with what is it? Oh my God. My brain is not working. Okay, let me see if I can. Find. Oh, there. Silent. Will be silent. So now someone's asking, is the sandblasting is used for metals? The sandblasting is used in the lab. And can it be done for, so here it says cleaning with pumice and air abrasion, sand blast. Next, this is the only spot where it's available. So the sandblasting is done in the lab, and it can be done to lithium disilicate. It can be done to other ceramics. Zirconia will, it will not affect it that much. So it will not really roughen the zirconia surface. Sandblasting can be done to other materials other than metals. Okay. So sandblasting, acid etching with the phosphoric, anyways, the preconditioning of an all ceramic restoration. Is there any other, like other than all ceramic except for zirconia? Is there anything else that is etched with the hydrofluoric acid? No. Just Just the ceramics, yes, just the ceramics. Just the ceramics except for zirconia. So by the way, when I got disconnected, the question numbers that you had in the chat, they're all gone. So whenever we're closer to the question that you want to ask about, please write it in the chat or just unmute the mic for a second and ask me. I'm moving slowly, so I'm just checking if there is anything there that needs to be explained. So far, I feel definitions. The 32, nobody asked about 32. Clasps should be designed so that upon insertion and removal of a partial denture, the reciprocal arm contact the abutment teeth when the retentive arm passes over the height of the contour. Exactly, that's what I know. So correct so far, but they are asking in order to. So why is it that way? Permit insertion and removal without applying excessive force. In order to achieve this goal, we survey. We make sure that the path of draw is correct. We make sure that we gauge the undercut. And if we gauge it to be deep undercut, we might just trim the tooth and remove a little bit of undercut. If we check and see that the undercut is good, but kind of on the deep side, so there we can put a wrought wire. We can pick the correct material of clasp, which is flexible enough to be used in there. So we can use a wrought wire clasp rather than a cast clasp. So which means it's not really the design, it's what we do, the treatment planning. Whereas provide the needed support to the abutment tooth during a period of added stress, it's exactly what the reciprocal arm does. The shape of the distal buccal border of a mandibular denture is determined primarily by the masseter, whereas if it's not primarily, it should be all of the above, including the external oblique ridge and the pterygomandibular raphe. Why is it that 35 is correct, the coronoid process? Because if we open and close, coronoid goes just in that buccal sulcus. When that coronoid moves into the buccal sulcus, it needs room, and that room is just beside the molars, the buccal, that area of the flange. So the flange needs to be thin enough to allow free movement of coronoid. Okay, 40, the form of the distal buccal border should be modified. So I need to pick two, and I need one of them to be masseter. So this question doesn't work. We just picking whatever is like the best answer. In my opinion, the best answer is 1 and 2. It might be 3 and 2. but I don't have 3. Oh, I have 3 and 2. 2 and 3 is B. It could work. Anything with masseter, anything with 2 would work. And it would be better if we can choose all of them. Okay. So if there was all of the above, it's actually all of the above. For 42, I don't think we should choose 4 only, because the Facebook can record the intercondylar distance. They didn't specifically say if they're talking about the basic Facebook. Maybe they are talking about both basic as well as kinematic. So kinematic is able to take the intercondylar distance. So I think it's better here to include rather than exclude the extra work that the Facebook can do. Question 43. When designing removed partial denture, changing the tilt of the cast on the surveyor alters. What does it alter? So we had this video where the person was trying to find the best path of insertion, and he first surveyed horizontal, if you guys remember in that video, and then he found like, oh no, I don't find, like when I'm in parallel to the floor, I have undercuts on one area only, on one location. So I'm going to tilt that so that I can create different crest of curvature, so that I can, like, whenever you change the tilt, that the top here doesn't change. So this arm will, it can go right, left, front, back, but not top down, but it doesn't tilt. It's the surveyor, so it will always be 90° to the whatever is underneath it. So it can be 90° to something parallel to the floor, or it can be 90° to something that is not parallel to the floor, tilted. And if it's tilted, it will draw a line somewhere, whereas if it's horizontal, it will draw a line. So see, now there is no undercut at all, for example. But if I do it this way, there is some kind of undercut. I don't know, behind my head. So whenever we change that, we will change the line that is drawn, which is the crest of the curvature. We will change the amount and the location of the undercut, right? So now, why not 4? 4 says the direction of forces applied to the partial denture. Okay. So whenever the person, like they wear their denture, let's say that this denture here at the bottom, it needs to seat, I don't know, you put it on the back and then you hook it up on the front, because that's the path of draw. Okay. Once it's in place, does the food come at it at an angle, or does it come at the same occlusal plane? It's the same. It didn't change, because the direction of the forces will depend on the occlusion, on this, the wax rim, on this here. The direction of the forces will be either I managed to get the balanced occlusion, I don't have so much of interference, or maybe I do. Let's hope for the best that we got no interference. So if there is no interference, then the upper occlusal plane and the lower occlusal plane will just chew. So in order to make sure that I get this right, I take the centric relation, etc., etc., etc. But it's not about how I see the denture. I hope that makes sense. I hope that can be imagined now. Again, imagine if this was the denture and for some reason we decided to put it from one side first. Okay, so the patient has to make sure that he puts it in obliquely and then hooks it up on one side first and then clips it on the other. Or it just goes from the side like that in order to attach to the undercut. Once the denture in place, they don't eat like this. They eat with normal direction. Mute all, yes. And then it's okay, back to normal. So,
Doctor, will the direction of force applied on the terminal abutment tooth will also change if we tilt the cast?
okay. The force that is mentioned, the force that is mentioned here, the direction of forces is the occlusal forces that is applied to the partial denture. Does like I'm just trying your question was different. Your question was different. So the occlusal forces applied to the denture, now my arrow is really weird. So the occlusal forces should be crush, crush, crush. Okay, so that's the force coming to the denture. Can you please repeat your question?
Doctor, I was like, the direction of forces applied to the partial denture, it's fine. It's not going to change. But if the question was, does the direction of forces applied to the terminal abutment will change with the tilt? What's going to be the
What kind
answer?
of force? What kind of force?
Occlusal forces.
Again, if I bring this,
because when we are
occlusal forces, sorry to interrupt, Shiva, but the occlusal force will be tooth against tooth, right? Tooth against tooth with food in the middle.
Yes.
So does that have to do anything, like how does that have to do with how I insert my denture? It doesn't. Does that make sense? Like kind of like imagine it. Okay. The occlusal force will not change. The direction of how I insert the denture is only significant while I insert the denture. Once the denture is in place, I need the ridge to support it. I need the rest seat to support it. So do I change? Does that, like when we alter, where is that other picture? When we alter this, do we give an oblique rest seat? No, 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 no. Only the guiding planes will follow that path of insertion. And the retentive tip will hook in the undercut, which is now gauged on the new tilt, on the new position. But the rest seat, the way that we prepare a rest seat will not change. Okay. So going forward, 44. A centric relation record must be used to articulate cast in which of the following cases? This was a question in our handout. So which cases, like what if more than 1/3 is lost? Maybe we only have half of the teeth, but those half is like 2 canines and 2 sevens. The only 4 teeth that I have is 2 canines and 2 sevens. And the rest of the teeth is gone. So I only have 1/5 of the teeth. But they are the 2 canines and the 2 sevens. I don't have to worry about this. I can just articulate based on those if they are in the good position. Because I don't have free end. I have two sevens. I have the sevens and I have the canines. I can articulate the denture based on those. Unless I'm going to change them. Is there more things that need to be explained for this question 44? If there is, you have 3 seconds to ask a question. Which of the following muscles compromise the reticular pad? So the buccinator, the superior constrictor, I think some fibers of temporalis, page 245 PTAP. It should be there somewhere in the notes, but not the palatoglossus and not the lateral pterygoid. So I think maybe the question that you wanted to ask was actually 44. The person who sent me those questions, maybe this was just a mistaken numbering, or maybe I copied it wrong. I think this one is straightforward. Then 46, and we have a question here as well. When a partial denture is to be constructed, where occlusal adjustment of the natural teeth is required, this should be performed in the first phase before we actually go ahead and do impressions and everything. So this relates to question 20 something, where I said, if there's super erupted tooth, I should check if I'm going to extract it. Should it be the best thing to extract it? Is it part of a deep curve of SPE and some kind of like generalized issue with the occlusion? Should the patient do orthodontics first? There are cases where the partial denture, it's not possible. They have, like, for example, the class 2 diff 2. Class 2 diff 2 with very deep bite and free end saddle. It's impossible to get the occlusion right. So sometimes it's necessary to adjust the occlusion with orthodontics, or maybe teeth are too bad to keep, so you extract them. And sometimes it's just a trimming, and sometimes it's an endo root canal treatment and a crown. So this should be done definitely prior to the final impression and prior to the centric relation, prior to right? So this should be done once we discover it. And most of the time, it's not discovered in the mouth. So primary impression is taken. Primary impression is studied. So the study cast, one of the things that you would study, what is the level of the occlusal plane? Is it normal or is it abnormal? If it's something like this, like for example, what we had in this scenario somewhere in the beginning, where I said, like, you know what, like if you find that teeth have super erupted and that your occlusal plane is zigzagging like this one, this is a disaster. You cannot put anything here. So something has to be done, either surgery or orthodontics or something, because otherwise we really don't have any space room for the denture. And that means in the very early phases, that's when it will be done. Before we start our, like, for example, if we have this, no, this is too bad. For example, if we have this situation and the line, the white line here saying like 6 has super erupted, then we should reduce 6, probably dentin will show. So we'll reduce it and we'll do a crown. We'll see whether or not we need root canal treatment. And then once that plane is flat, then we take the final impression and then we fabricate the, we make the wax rims and those things, because otherwise it will not work. $56, $63. 47 is okay. 48. 49 does not exist. It's hidden. It's invisible. Okay, so 50. Abutment teeth for removable partial denture may be best preserved by, may. Okay, so sometimes I can do this, sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can do this. And the most important is that my design is good for, like, does not put too much of stress on the teeth, does not put the abutment teeth are like, I don't know, the gingiva is free, there is no food impaction, etc., etc. Like I have, the design is correct. But splinting with adjacent teeth, so abutment teeth for a removable partial denture may sometimes best be splinted with adjacent teeth. Is it possible to splint adjacent teeth? Yes, but not with a periodontal wire, for example. No, that's not like that's. Is it because they are periodontally they have periodontitis? They should have stable, if they had attachment loss, okay, but stable periodontitis. Is it, but also says best preserved by. Yes, so best preserved by may sometimes, it may sometimes be the best to do splinting, and it may sometimes be the best to do full coverage. And both of these are incorporated in the prosthesis design. So the prosthesis design, which distributes the forces, distributes the load, make sure that we have indirect retainer, make sure that we have stability. All of this is definitely like the most important, but it may sometimes be the best thing to splint some abutments. It may sometimes in that situation be the best thing to do full coverage with crown veneers. For example, if the patient has an extensive restoration, extensive amalgam, extensive composite, then it may be the best thing. It is actually the best thing in that situation to do a full coverage crown. Okay. So in that situation, it is the best thing to do. In that situation, it is the best thing to do. And because it's only in that situation, I need the word may, but not in every situation. Okay. So then moving on. '56. A tilted molar can be used as a fixed partial denture abutment if it undergoes orthodontic uprighting. It is coping. No. It's a coping and a telescopic crown are used on the abutment. We usually don't do this. I think it's just from the book. The telescopic crown was this one. Where did it go? We had a picture somewhere. This one, telescopic crown, the gray with the grooves is the coping, is the first crown. And then the whole FPD, the one on the top, that has the second crown. So this is the first crown, this is the second crown with the bridge. And the first crown is seated with the long axis of the tooth. The second crown is seated with the long axis of this abutment tooth. And design is very complicated, so not really something like those two options are not so commonly used. It's either the tooth is not so bad and we can do so if it's less than 25 degrees, we can do the just the bridge. And yes, maybe the tooth needs root canal treatment, but if the patient is like, that's the only option I have, I cannot do an implant. So if we go back to that option, so sometimes with the use of that telescopic crown, somewhere in the range of 25 degrees, you can work with it, but preferably not more than 15 degrees. Non-rigid connector in temporary crown, temporary, but why non-rigid connector is okay for permanent crown? I'm not so sure I understand what you mean. So temporary crown does not have a non-rigid connector, so it's not good. I'm not so sure what you mean. This is the non-rigid connector. So if we go back to non-rigid connector, it's allowed in, I think the chat box is hiding it. The non-rigid connector is allowed in. Why non-rigid connector is good for fixed denture? It is not good. Okay, why does it help in this situation? For example, why is it one of the options that are available for the pyre abutment to do the non-rigid connector? Okay, so we have to start with this alloy is base metal. It's the best of the best. It's the highest rigidity, base metal. It will not flex. No, it still will flex. It will flex, it will flex, it will flex. Even though that is base metal, yes. And then what will happen if it will flex? That tooth will keep going up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay, so, but when the length is short, when I have shorter length, the flexion is less. So if I had just half of this phone and try to flex just this part, I would not be able to flex it. But if I hold the whole thing and try to flex it, I would be able to flex it a little bit. Okay, so short, that was there were like some rules for flexion. Again, somewhere here in this handout, right? So the shorter the span, the better. If we have just one abutment, it's better. So if we go back to this structure will flex more than that short and that short. But then what about in the middle? In the middle, that thing will just, like, if it needs to move in and out a little bit, it will. Up and down, in and out a little bit. So it does not transfer this load to the pyre abutment. That's what happens. And then over here, even though this is a cantilever, because there's no one to hold it, like just imagine I have one hand here, one clip, and one clip here. And I try, like when I flex, I have to flex like this, like this. Two people holding edges and then flex. But that part, no, it's not gonna be flex like this. So because this is there and this is there, this will suffer. But if this is not attached, then that will not suffer. So I hope that explains the non-rigid connector. The other situation where we can use it is for, where did it go? Yes, over here. So the non-rigid connector here, the tooth is tilted. So I need to actually seat a different long axis. I need to seat this crown with this long axis. I don't know if you see my arrow, but it's straight for this premolar. So now for the molar, I need to seat with the same angle. For example, it's 15 degrees. Okay, so that I can prep and I have this. So how do I do this? The two elements are different. One element is like this, so I cannot cast it and then seat them. They will not seat. So it's for the seating and for the preparation to be more conservative, because if I prep it as if I don't care, like I'll just make it was tilted, I will make it straight, I will cut so much from this side. Okay. Non-rigid means more flexible. No, non-rigid means this device. Like thank you. I thought non-rigid is not so hard. No, non-rigid is that non-rigid. It's not the cast connector. Okay. So you're like, there's another person who asked me about this question, so I hope their answers are like the doubts are covered, like they understand now the problem is fixed. So in 59, when a removable partial denture is fabricated to occlude with natural teeth, the occlusal form of the artificial teeth is influenced by the occlusal form of the remaining teeth. Which means that if the remaining teeth are in poor position, this needs to be fixed before we fabricate the denture, right? So we first do our own, assessment of what's going on. Yes, it looks okay. It's very mild. The premolar drifted. Where's the premolar? The premolar drifted distally a little bit. Yeah, but it's very mild. Okay, if that's the case, then I'll work with it. If the teeth are in very bad shape, like this, like imagine this situation and then go back to this question. When a removable partial denture is fabricated to occlude with the natural teeth, the occlusal form of the artificial teeth is influenced by the teeth. For sure, it's influenced by the teeth. So we better fix the teeth before we start making our denture, because in the end they would have to occlude together. Okay, in the end they will have to occlude together, but maybe in the beginning it's impossible to make a denture. So I'm going to make sure that my treatment planning will include I clean the inside part of the denture recovered. Then share screen share, yes. Okay. Then adding the acrylic will just squish and there will not be anything remaining, and I didn't reline anything. If I make sure that I put my fingers on the rest seats, then the tissues are in supporting position and the denture is in the same position, so it's not. I think I am having technical difficulties today. I don't know what's going on. We have 10 minutes maybe to go. I hope it arrives. Let's see what is next. I think 64. Someone had asked you can see the screen. 63 for Alexander. This is the okay. So if it's not like this, please, like whoever, can you please
Recording
send me
stopped.
your questions on Messenger, please? Messenger. The rest of the questions which were not discussed, please send them on Messenger. And see you guys on Sunday. We'll discuss surgery. Please read the first handout of surgery. Okay. Take care. Good night. Technical difficulties.